Do a little on-the-job training over there at Nazi U. Alrighty, moving right along. As you're probably aware, everybody's still going over this whole aftermath of Muammar Gaddafi's execution yesterday, which is really what it was. They grabbed this guy, the camera, the cell phone video shows him very clearly alive and under control and captured. He was wanted by the ICC. He was entitled to his day in court, and somebody put a gun to his head and pulled the trigger to make sure that he never got to testify in court as to what was going on. If he was really guilty of all the things that the U.S. said he was guilty of in order to justify invading and smashing his country, bombing it back into the Stone Age. Now, you and I all know what the real crime was here. Gaddafi's biggest crime was a government-issued, value-based currency, the Gold Dinar, which is a major threat to the power and wealth of private central bankers who love to loan out the public currency at interest. Now remember, the United States fought a revolution to free itself from that very system when the privately owned Bank of England lobbied King George III to pass the Currency Act, which ordered all commerce in the colonies to use banknotes borrowed at interest from the Bank of England. The resulting stripping of wealth from the American people for the British bankers was the major reason for the American Revolution. So Gaddafi did not want to involve himself with dollars, did not want to involve himself with the International Monetary Fund. And so he put together a government-issued value-based currency based on gold. And it was so effective and attractive, other nations in Africa were saying, yeah, we want to use the gold dinar. We don't want to do the dollar. If we use the dollar, then, there's a little, shaving off the top that automatically goes to the bankers. And we don't need that, not for money they just print up out of thin air. So that's the real reason Gaddafi had to be destroyed. Remember, back in 1933, when Germany dropped the private bank imposed on them after the Treaty of Versailles, and they went to a value-based currency, the global bankers boycotted them. They were out to destroy Germany any way they could, and that set the stage for World War II. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And just to wrap up on this whole situation, and I know I've said this all before, but it is so important that everybody come to understand this. This clash of civilizations, this endless war, is a war between banking systems. The United States is attacking nations that refuse to allow private central banks to take control of the nation's wealth. The United States is attacking nations that avoid Western-style banking, compound interest, what they call usury. Your money is being spent and your children are dying horrible deaths in its 10, maybe going on 12 wars, all to make the world safe for compound interest and the permanent ascendancy of the banking class. Your money is being spent and your children blown to bloody bits to keep the world enslaved to private central banks printing up and issuing the public currency at interest. A system which by design always produces more debt than available money to make the slavery permanent. In other words, your money is being spent and your children dying to oppose the very banking system this nation was started with. There is the ultimate betrayal. Little quote from Henry Ford. It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I would believe there'd be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Well, Henry, we're a little late, but it looks like we're going to get there here. This is why we're at war across the globe. Banks make money off of wars. Bankers will gladly see 1 billion people die if it keeps the survivors in debt slavery in perpetuity. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, and look how hard the U.S. is trying to start a new global war. Follow the money. It leads to the bankers. And that is the real reason we're at war with everybody here. All right, we're going to go to the phones. Dee from Minnesota. Aloha, Dee. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. First of all, Libya.
Yes.
Libya is now toast.
Yes. Actually, it was toast the moment we invaded.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that. It didn't matter whether Gaddafi died or not. Libya was toast from day one.
Yeah, well, you see, that's part of the plan. That's part of the plan. Libya was rich. They had no income tax. They had gun freedom. They had all new infrastructure, that wonderful waterworks that Gaddafi built, the value-based currency and all that stuff. Yep. Now they've had a war of liberation, and, they're already like billions of dollars into debt for the cost of the liberation. And now the Libyan people are going to have to borrow money and go into debt in order to build and replace what they had before, free and clear. Yeah, you got your house back. Now, too bad you're on the hook for another mortgage for another 30 years.
You've heard of George Galloway, haven't you?
Oh, yes, of course. I'm a great admirer of his.
He had a program, comment on Press TV, and he was saying how the Libyans would make another revolution and wouldn't let NATO and the West go in and exploit them. And I almost couldn't help wondering if he was naive or really stupid, because number one, that place is tribal, so it's going to be hard for them to do that again, even if they wanted to. Secondly, was the revolutionaries that asked NATO to go in there in the first place. Why would they turn on them? Thirdly, you got people like Belhaj, who are nefarious to say the least, who aren't going to want to turn over their power that easy.
No, they're not.
So I just wondered if he was really naive or stupid or what.
I think in this case it may have been a little bit naive because he comes from a culture of British imperialism where there was always there's our government and there's the government we're overthrowing, and I don't think he really comprehends the idea of a power vacuum, which is what we're really dealing with here. And the power vacuum issue is that this transitional national council in Libya is not elected. It is not supported by the ordinary people. In fact, the reason they had to go in and just make sure they got Gaddafi with all this bombing and everything is it was falling apart and turning into a defeat. And they can wave Gaddafi's corpse around and say this is victory. I don't think it's really happened because they're still going to have to get the entire country to calm down and go along with the new government. That's not going to happen. There's going to be all these fighting factions and warlords. I think they've triggered a civil war. But in the end, they've smashed they've smashed the Libyan state bank. The Transitional National Council has already agreed to impose a private central bank on the people of Libya. That was the deal to get that center seat. And so, from the bankers' point of view, they've already won. They get their private central bank. That dangerous Gold Dinar is now a part of history. And everybody in Libya is going to have to start borrowing money to build back up what they had before, free and clear, before the war hit.
Yep. And I saw you had a piece on Russia Today. It was linked to what really happened. They had this South American guy, and I liked what he had said. Mm-hmm. Now that Libya's done and they're supposedly bringing troops home from Iraq, now you might as well put Venezuela and South America on orange alert and Iran and Syria on red alert. I think it's true.
Yeah, I think it is true. The plan was always to go out and conquer the world and make it America. If you go back to those Project for the New America Century Foundation documents, that was always the plan. And, General Wesley Clark was saying in interviews, years ago, these are the nations they're going to invade in this order. And he went right down the list of nations that they're invading. And sure enough, that's what they're doing. We're in World War III right now. And unfortunately, I think the U.S. is going to lose it because every major war since the beginning of the 20th century, every major war has been lost by the country that starts it.
But I wanted to let you know those two things. And it was funny because when Muhammad came back, he went on a vacation this summer. He came back and, he was asking me about Libya. He says, well, what do you think is going to happen to Libya? And I basically told him what I had told you, but I didn't say it as nicely. And he's like, well, why do you say that? We got to be fair. The UN had to go in. It was either 50,000, 100,000, or 5 million Gaddafi would have killed. I don't think so. Gaddafi was a nutcase. He was nuttier than a fruitcake. But he did a lot of good for his people, and
he really
wouldn't
did.
have wiped out his whole country.
I don't think he was all that crazy either. He did a lot of posturing and posing, but remember, he's playing to his own people, using body language and social custom that we find very strange and bizarre. If he was going to kill 5 million of his own people, he would have done it long before now. We got to take a break. Thank you for the call.
I think so, too.
We'll be right back after these commercials. Thanks an awful lot. We'll be right back.
We will not go down in Gaza tonight.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about the aftermath, what's going to happen in Libya. And basically, what NATO and the United States have done is gone into the place, smashed it up into pieces, and now they're going to grab the really good pieces and put them in their pocket. I mean, all these British and American companies are they're on the way to Libya right now with all these rebuilding projects. Yes, we'll come in and we'll put it all back together. Now that we spent the American taxpayers' money blowing it all up, we're going to come in and we'll loan you the money to glue it back together again. Isn't that a swell deal? And you'll spend the rest of your lives working off that debt. That's the way it's supposed to be. That was the real reason we smashed the place. Did the same thing in Iraq. Hear about all this nation building and all the rest of it. Remember those long ago days when they told you that Iraq's reconstruction and rebuilding would be paid for by the oil? You believed them. Well, you got stuck for that bill as well. So basically, with Gaddafi gone, his one saving grace, he did hold the nation together. Pretty much in peace, not counting the time that Israel tricked the United States into bombing the place and killing his daughter. But with Gaddafi now gone, and with this transitional national council really not enjoying the support of the Libyan people, the only way they're going to become the new government is with massive military support on the ground. And we already know that Obama lied about American boots on the ground. They were talking about, we've got a few troops surrounding that embassy. And then there was that story about the 82nd Airborne that took losses in one of the fights there. I mean, at this point, it's a moot discussion. Is the government lying to us? Heck yeah. They are. It's like that old terrible joke, but it's absolutely true. How do you know when your government is lying? Their lips are moving. Meanwhile, somebody did this funny little video. It's humor and satire, breaking news, Sarkozy dead, and it's basically the same video with Sarkozy's face put on the body. And what it basically tells us is the United States government's latest propaganda coup is already a global joke. As well it should be.
I've had friends who have worked in Libya, and they said that was a very, how would you describe, a free, lax country, lots of construction going on.
Well, it used to be.
He was doing a lot for his people. Yeah, but this thing that he was a tyrant and everybody was living in fear is
It's complete. It's complete. It's completely not. No, before you go on, I want to respond to that. Okay, all of this bad mouthing of him. I mean, even they even took shots at Libyans in Back to the Future, and I mean, it was very obvious and gratuitous. Oh, it's Libyan terrorists now and everything like this. Okay, the reason Gaddafi was so hated is he did all that for his nation, all the building, the waterworks, and the rest of it, without putting his people into hock to the private central banks. That was his sin. That's why he had to be destroyed. And that's why they had to destroy all of Libya, so they're going to have to borrow from the international banks to build back up what they had before. It's all about keeping people slaves to debt. And you're absolutely right. The Libyan people understand we don't support that either. We're also debt slaves over here. The entire world is one big pool of debt slaves finally waking up and realizing that we are held slaves by a gigantic hoax and a fraud called private central banking issuing the public currency at interest. Okay. Now, somebody wrote in an email during this last commercial break, and I do want to respond to it on the air because of this very obvious push toward a new war. and the fact that the used car salesman plot didn't get any traction, and the fact that Gaddafi got shot yesterday, it has become really a joke. This idea that they caught him alive and then they shot him in the head because he shouldn't have his day in court. That's not working out too well for the U.S. government. Big propaganda coup, and it's being treated like it's a joke around the world. So we're back to this idea of a possible terrorist attack. Certainly that's the reason TSA is all over Tennessee, stopping cars and grabbing your crotches on the road there.